If you don't want to be abandoned by me, be careful." Mickey, my husband, sneered at me with an ugly smirk. Next to him, my mother-in-law was also sporting a similarly creepy grin. "That's right, we'll make use of you thoroughly." Seeing that scene, I was desperately holding back my laughter. They hadn't realized yet that the real misunderstanding was on their part. Pretending to be clueless, I raised my voice. "What? I'm no longer a daughter-in-law as of a month ago." After a while, lively voices could be heard from the living room in the distance. Today, relatives had gathered to celebrate the completion of our new house. The guests invited by Mickey and Melanie must have been surprised by the sudden developments. The moment they rushed into the living room, their faces turned pale at once. "You've done something outrageous. How could you do this?" "Don't worry, everything was already prepared on this side. Now, the counterattack begins. My name is April Wilson. I'm a nurse working in a small clinic in town. I live with my husband, Mickey, and my mother-in-law, Melanie. We got married a year ago, when I was 29 years old. Back then, I was working at a large hospital where I met Mickey as a patient. Mickey, who was hospitalized with a bone fracture, seemed to have fallen in love with me at first sight and began pursuing me earnestly during his stay. "April, I've never met anyone as kind and beautiful as you. Please consider a serious relationship, with marriage in mind." After being discharged, Mickey continued to fervently express his feelings. Eventually, his confident proposal from a man working at a major company moved my heart. To be honest, I too strongly desired to get married. It was a time when I felt ready to settle down. Though our courtship was brief, such progress was possible for working adults. Nevertheless, my father was slightly critical of this marriage plan. "Hasn't it only been 6 months since you met? Is there a need to rush into marriage? Are you sure there are no problems?" "There's no problem at all, Dad. You always worry too much. You were raised in a single-parent household, so it's understandable that I worry. I lost my mother when I was young, and thereafter was raised solely by my father. My busy father is currently on a work assignment out of state. He eventually approved of the marriage, and we were able to hold our wedding. The Wilson family had many relatives, so it was a grand occasion. However, I soon came to realize something. My happiness had peaked at that moment, and my father's intuition had been correct. At the time of our marriage, Mickey suggested that we live together with his mother. Mickey's father had passed away a few years ago, and he was concerned about his mother living alone. Having been raised in a single-parent household, I understood the sentiment of caring for a parent. Understanding his feelings for his mother, I accepted the proposal. Of course, I was aware that living together could easily lead to friction with my mother-in-law. However, before the marriage, I felt that she was very approachable and cheerful. With that in mind, we chose a duplex apartment suitable for 2 households, anticipating minimal impact on our lives. However, this expectation turned out to be overly optimistic. Simultaneously with our marriage, Mickey's and his mother's personalities changed dramatically, and I ended up being exploited by them. After getting married, considering pregnancy, I decided to switch jobs to a clinic with no night shifts. With this situation in mind, my mother-in-law insisted that I had more time and pushed household chores onto me. Consulting Mickey about the situation was fruitless. After our marriage, he shifted his focus to a work-centric life, leaving household matters entirely to me. "Take care of my mother for me. I'm tired from work. Don't talk to me about such trivial things." "I'm really struggling here." "The problem is that you can't handle it properly. Generally, wives are expected to manage such things skillfully. Why can't you do that?" Mickey always criticized me, insisting I manage things better. The man who had earnestly pursued me before our marriage seemed to have lost interest completely afterward. His transformation was a profound disappointment. I hadn't expected such a situation, and I was utterly exhausted. However, I couldn't bring myself to consult my father. I didn't want to trouble him so soon into my married life. I tried to convince myself that Mickey and Melanie might be stressed by the new living environment, but their behavior only worsened day by day. Mickey frequently went out to drinking parties and seldom came home early. His business trips increased, and his time at home became even less. What was most unpleasant was that Melanie used a spare key to enter our place without permission while I was out. She would take my personal belongings without asking, not only jewelry and bags, but even clothes that didn't fit her. When I found my expensive clothes stretched out and dumped on the floor, I nearly cried and resolved to confront her. Please do not use my belongings without permission. Using the spare key to enter our place when I'm not here is an invasion of our privacy. However, Melanie completely ignored my complaint. What are you talking about? Moving between family members' rooms is natural. There's no such thing as privacy in a family. At that moment, my anger took over. Please apologize. This is utterly unacceptable. Unacceptable? What an exaggeration. I am a human being too. It's not unreasonable to have things I cannot forgive. If necessary, I will call the police. Melanie, full of anger, retorted and shouted, "It doesn't matter. We are family after all. Enough already." Shocked by her response, I was at a loss for words. When Mickey returned home, I immediately told him about the incident, but he didn't understand. Just before leaving the room to head to the bath, he coldly said, "I expected some skills from you as a nurse, but you really are incompetent." Hearing those words, I felt an overwhelming sense of my world crumbling. This is impossible, I thought. I decided in my heart that I had to divorce him. I didn't want to worry my father, but I pondered how to bring it up and how to stand up to my mother-in-law and husband. A few days later, Mickey suddenly proposed buying a house. He was enthusiastic about building a custom home to his liking, and I superficially complied. Might as well let him build the house he wants. The harassment from Mickey and Melanie continued, and I became increasingly disheartened. The new house was nearly completed, and it was a month before moving. "Look, next month is the move. Are you done with the packing?" "It's almost finished. I've put away clothes and dishes that are no longer in use." Cardboard boxes were stacked in a corner of the room. Seeing that, Mickey smiled broadly. "Good for you. I'll take you to the next house, too. Someone incompetent like you is useless wherever you go. Be grateful." However, I had already made up my mind. "I won't follow you anymore. Please divorce me." "What? I refuse to work as a servant for you and your mother anymore. I am requesting a divorce." The moment I said those words, Mickey's face turned fiercely angry. With rage, he raised his hand toward me. When I realized it, I was on the floor from the strong impact. "Don't get cocky. You're not a house servant or a wife anymore. You're a maid. Pay $100,000 to celebrate the new house. A maid." With my hand on my slapped cheek, I looked up at him in disbelief. Mickey, revealing his true nature, raised his hand again, while I was still dazed. Not just his hand, but his foot, too, and the verbal abuses were mercilessly directed at me. I just endured it, but that was only on the surface. They had no way of knowing my true intentions. Inside, I was planning my revenge. I couldn't be satisfied with just a divorce anymore. Mickey did not notice me smirking while I crouched. A month later, we moved into the new residence, a custom-designed house that Mickey had personally planned. The house featured a spacious bedroom with a single bed, a fitness room, a study, and a bedroom and hobby room for Melanie. Naturally, there was no room for me. Even a single stool in the kitchen was considered a luxury. Mickey's attention to detail shines through. "How wonderful this house is. Your mother must be delighted to live here." I could only look on with cold eyes at such superficial displays of affection. I whispered quietly, "Well, what a wonderful thing. Surely the relatives will be surprised by this." It was a small trap I had set. As expected, Melanie immediately jumped at those words. "That's a great idea. Why don't we invite all the relatives to this wonderful house? Let's have a party to celebrate the new house." "Yes, let's do that. Maybe I'll brag to my uncle and cousins as well." Excited, the two immediately contacted their relatives and planned a grand housewarming party. Melanie, adept at showing off, was busy preparing for the party. Of course, these preparations involved exploiting me. And then the first big event in the newly built duplex took place. About 10 people gathered, primarily relatives of the Wilson family. With so many people assembled, the house naturally became lively. Melanie, dressed stylishly, greeted the relatives at the entrance, while Mickey proudly showed off the new residents' living room. True to their nature as a pair fond of appearances, the interior was adorned with sophisticated decorations. Indirect lighting and houseplants created a pleasant atmosphere, and the table, decorated with flowers and fruits, was lined with fine Chinese ceramics. In the background, classical music played in Mickey's home theater, a hobbyist's dream, with captivating foreign landscapes displayed on the screen. Meanwhile, I was constantly cooking in the kitchen. Mickey's unsuspecting relatives commented upon seeing me hard at work. "April, you're doing so well. Mickey is really lucky to have a wife as beautiful and diligent as you." "That's not true," I started to say. But just then, Mickey approached me. "Come over here," he said. "Ah, okay." I had a bad feeling, but despite still being in the middle of cooking, Mickey pulled my arm and led me to another room. Soon, Melanie followed, fixing me with a stern gaze. "I saw you looking happy being praised by my uncle." "That's not—" "Don't lie. You were smiling." Then Mickey looked down at me and sneered coldly. "If you don't want to be abandoned by me, be careful." Melanie, standing next to him, was laughing as well, yet I decided not to let it bother me. But I had a plan, too. I quietly glanced at the wall clock. It was almost time for my plan to start. With a purposely playful expression and tone, I said, "What? I'm no longer a daughter-in-law from a month ago." "What?" As they stared at me in shock, I stood up confidently. "Do you remember what Mickey said a month ago? That I am no longer a wife, but a maid? Melanie, you've treated me like a maid too, so you think I'm not a daughter-in-law either, right?" "What are you trying to say?" As soon as I started speaking, the atmosphere changed. Mickey seemed overwhelmed for a moment and couldn't hide his confusion. Meanwhile, Melanie was snorting right next to him. "Yes, exactly. Since you are useless as a daughter-in-law, we treat you like a maid." When Melanie declared that, I was already listening to the murmur in the living room. It was starting. I secretly smiled. "That's right. I am no longer a daughter-in-law, nor am I a maid. I am leaving this house." The moment I uttered those words, the murmur from the living room grew louder. Mickey and Melanie noticed the noise and began to panic. "What's that sound? Is that my voice?" When the two hurried into the living room, the relatives were engrossed in a video being played on the screen. It was a video that was painful for me to watch. The screen displayed a moment where Mickey was verbally abusing me and raising his hand to strike. "What is this?" Mickey exclaimed in the living room, his face turning pale. The relatives' stern gazes were fixed on him. Overwhelmed by their stares, Mickey trembled. In fact, I had secretly recorded the incident from a month ago, the moment he declared me merely a maid. I had been gathering evidence of my husband's abuse and my mother-in-law's bullying for some time. These were necessary for the divorce proceedings, but my anger did not stop there. I had held on to them as material for revenge, specifically for today. It being a special day during the housewarming party, I had set the video to play automatically. It was unfortunate to inconvenience the relatives, but it was a necessary step. "Mickey, what does this mean? How terrible!" one relative exclaimed. Faced with their cold stares, Mickey was unusually unsettled. Seizing the moment, I slammed the papers I had been hiding onto the table. "There's no escape now, so please sign here. We are getting a divorce." The divorce papers I had prepared today stepped me away from merely being a maid. Divorce? This is no joke, just a typical marital dispute. Typical? It's normal to abuse and hit your wife? That's not a marriage. I'm sick of you. At my statement, the relatives uniformly nodded. Indeed, it seemed they were supporting me after seeing such a video. It was clear who was at fault. While Mickey was still hesitating to sign, I presented the final option. "Furthermore, it's clear you've been having an affair. I have gathered solid evidence of this too." "What?" "I've always felt something was off with the way your earnings weren't increasing. I hired a detective agency to gather concrete evidence. It seems your affair is with the daughter of a client CEO. This revelation will undoubtedly affect your career." I spread out the photos and documents of the evidence on the table for the relatives to see. The photos showed the two of them entering a hotel. "Don't look. Please don't look." Mickey frantically tried to cover them up, throwing himself forward. I had a hard time suppressing my laughter at his ridiculous behavior. "I will be seeking a fair share of assets from both you and your partner. Since she is also married, there might be claims from her side as well." That's not right. What exactly he thought was wrong wasn't clear. As usual, Melanie supported Mickey's excuses. "What are you talking about? An affair is nothing. It could even be said to be a mark of a man. I've told you repeatedly that you're not fit to be a wife because you can't forgive even this much." It seemed Melanie still did not realize how her comments were causing discomfort among the relatives. I looked at her with a cold gaze while assessing my next move. "Melanie, do you remember the terrible things you've done to me?" As I said this, I started fiddling with my smartphone. In fact, I had set it up to control the videos from this phone. I selected a specific video and projected it onto the large screen. "You imposed housework like laundry and cooking on me, entered my room without permission when I was away, used my belongings. Oh, and there was also the time you tried to wear clothes that didn't fit you, stretching them to the point they couldn't be used anymore." The screen displayed Melanie's rude behavior, scenes of her throwing laundry and nitpicking over the cooking. When the video showed Melanie sneaking into the bedroom, gasps of surprise erupted from the female relatives. These harassments were perfectly captured by the surveillance cameras. "What is this? Filming our house without permission. This is a violation of privacy," Melanie screamed angrily. It was too convenient for her to claim a violation now when she had denied my privacy rights before. Filming and revealing what happens inside a home is clearly a privacy violation, but at this point, I no longer cared about any accusations. After all, it was Melanie who had barged into my room uninvited and behaved as she pleased. It was clear who was acting inappropriately. The screen prominently displayed Melanie rummaging through clothes and accessories. She looked like a thief. "Stop it! Don't look!" Melanie's face finally turned pale. Behind her, the female relatives commented, "Even Melanie, that's just awful. Unbelievable. If someone did that to me, I'd call the police immediately." They intensified their criticisms as Melanie grew increasingly flustered. I pointed at her firmly and spoke loudly. "What I cannot forgive the most is that you broke a keepsake from my deceased mother. It was something precious, and you tried to laugh it off. You haven't paid a cent for the repairs. Do you understand how much you and your son have hurt me over this past year, lacking any human empathy?" With that, the relatives finally took my side. They stood behind me, glaring at Melanie and Mickey with stern faces. "Melanie, Mickey, apologize to April." That's right. Don't you feel sorry for April? While Mickey and Melanie were still reluctant, the pressure from the relatives finally made them apologize to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Though the apology was insincere, I intended to accept it in front of the relatives. Prompted by his uncle, Mickey finally decided to fill out the divorce papers. After he signed them, I felt relieved and thanked the uncle. Don't worry. If there is anything I can help with in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. You've had a tough time. If you need anything moving forward, I'll be here to support you, so just get in touch. Thank you. To be honest, I was a bit worried because they were his relatives. However, in the end, the actions of Mickey and Melanie were too abnormal to ignore. The relatives who cared about me until I left the house gave me their contact information, saying I could reach out for support anytime. After the relatives had left, only a despondent Mickey and Melanie remained. I felt lighter. The first to speak in the quiet aftermath was Mickey. As expected, you've done something outrageous. How could you do this? Melanie also turned her surprise into anger toward me, but it no longer affected me. This is what you call reaping what you sow. I'm going to submit the divorce papers now. I'll also take my belongings shortly. I won't allow that. Give me the divorce papers. Mickey tried to snatch the completed divorce papers from me. Just then, someone who had come in place of the relative stepped out from behind me and stopped him. If you lay a hand on my daughter again, I'll do the same to you. He quickly twisted Mickey's arm behind his back. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Dad. At just the right moment, my father appeared, and I quickly moved to his side to ensure my safety. My father, my sole supporter, had been informed in advance. He had rushed from his remote work location after hearing about my plan to fight back today. No, it was just a small joke, Mickey pleaded. There's no need to pretend anymore. I know everything, my father said, his voice firm. I know you've been having an affair and what you've been doing to my daughter. When I found out, I was furious. Ouch, ouch, it hurts, Mickey cried out as my father's grip tightened. My father was noticeably larger than Mickey. In his younger days, he had kept fit with boxing and American football. Even now, he kept up with running and weight training. Mickey, whose hobbies included watching movies and dining and who had become somewhat overweight, stood no chance against him. As a single father who had raised me with care, my father was even more consumed by a desire for revenge than I was. He looked at Mickey with a chilling gaze. About your affair partner, he continued. She's actually the daughter of the president of my company. What? Then, you work at Eleven's company? That's right. I'm the executive vice president of She's company. Mickey's face became pale in a matter of seconds. I've already reported this matter to the president. Furthermore, according to the young lady, you initially hid the fact that you were married when you approached her, while she also bears some blame for continuing the relationship after the truth came out. The president was very angry with your tactics. At that moment, Mickey looked more desolate than at any other point today. It was the first time I heard that my father's company was connected to Mickey's workplace. As I was still processing the surprise, my father, with a smile, returned to his stern gaze toward Mickey. For your company, our company is a significant client. Honestly, there are plenty of other options available to us even without your products. So, when terminating our dealings, I'll make sure to inform your president that, due to issues on both sides, continuing business would be difficult. All transactions will be halted. Hearing these words, Mickey screamed and slumped down in despair. With this, Mickey would lose not only his prospects for advancement, but also his place in the company. His actions had caused trouble for the company. Mickey was completely drained of energy and stood dumbfounded. Beside him, Melanie screamed at my father, who was moving out my luggage, calling him a demon, a devil. Hearing this, I wondered if she was actually talking about herself, but the joy of leaving this house was greater than any of their words. Excited to be moving, I transported all my belongings. Then I got into the truck that my father had driven, and we set off. As the door closed and the car started moving, I saw them chasing after us in the rearview mirror. "Thief, leave the maid and your belongings behind. Do you really think my company will believe you? Losing the contract with XI's company won't affect us at all." Hearing that, I was dumbfounded. Surrounded by such people, it was amazing I had managed to live there at all. "I think so too," my father replied. "Their disgraceful behavior was painful to watch until the very end, and it surely must have been witnessed by the neighbors as well." Residents peered out their windows, listening to their voices. I felt sympathy for anyone who had to continue living near them. After we turned the corner and they were out of sight, I expressed my gratitude to my father. "Thank you so much for everything today, Dad." "Not at all. I'd do anything for my precious daughter," he said with a smile, my hero unchanged from my childhood. Later, the divorce papers were successfully processed. Given the abundance of evidence, it was only natural that Mickey was found to be at fault. We also settled the division of assets. Although the house went to Mickey, he seemed to be struggling with the mortgage for the new home. Originally, Mickey had relied on my income as a nurse and had chosen only high-end materials for the construction. That luxurious house was actually not suitable for our real lives due to Mickey's showy nature. Both the title and the mortgage of the house were solely in his name. His savings were rapidly depleting due to the hefty monthly mortgage payments, and I am truly relieved that we did not take out a joint mortgage. Of course, Mickey was also obligated to pay property division. He was being claimed not only by me, but also by the spouse of his affair partner. Since the president of his company was monitoring the payments, there were no delays. The president had decided to ensure that the compensation would be paid to regain trust, and was paying close attention to the payments to me as well. Mickey felt uncomfortable at his workplace and was in a psychologically uneasy situation. He was effectively sidelined within the company. How did it come to this? He must have thought. Mickey, who had always been ostentatious, now faced the difficult reality of his circumstances. Moreover, the president's daughter, his affair partner, had also divorced and been fired from her job at the family company. Yes. I firmly demanded an apology from her. Having lived a pampered life as the president's daughter, she probably wouldn't recognize her mistakes without going through something like this. She now faces the harsh realities of society, while Mickey endures the severe backlash of a society he once took for granted. Both are terrified daily by the enormous sums they have to pay. Meanwhile, Melanie has begun a path of self-destruction. Knowing her son is financially struggling, she started working part-time, but committed misconduct. She secretly stole many food items from the supermarket where she worked. When the inventory numbers didn't match, the manager checked surveillance cameras and caught Melanie taking items. When questioned, she showed no remorse, reportedly arguing, "There's so much here. A little bit will be fine. It's because you're so stingy that this store isn't doing well." Moreover, it was shocking to learn that she had been reselling some of the stolen goods online. These actions eventually led to her arrest by the police, making her a notorious figure in the community. Even after being released, she continues to live in that house, but it's far from the fine home it once was, now completely run down. The house, originally built to keep up appearances, soon fell into disrepair due to a lack of maintenance. Years later, I learned it had come to be known in the community as the garbage house. 3 years after the divorce, I found myself deeply contemplating marriage again. Encouraged by a friend, I decided to remarry. My new partner was a kind-hearted and gentle person who understood and supported me emotionally. I introduced him to my father, who quickly gave his approval, and I felt a true sense of relief about starting my married life again. Later, we were blessed with energetic twin boys, filling our home with vitality. Parenting was challenging, and the generous support of our parents was indispensable. My in-laws were warm-hearted people who always valued proper manners and respected my opinions and thoughts in parenting. After overcoming the hardships and challenges of my past, I was profoundly grateful to have met such wonderful people. My father also deeply loves his grandchildren, and his happy, doting expressions when he's with them are unlike anything I've seen before. "Peekaboo! Look, it's Grandpa," I say to the boys. "Oh, Dad, your face is so unguarded," I tease him. "Really? Do you think so?" he replies, trying to compose his smile, only to quickly return to his gentle expression, completely embodying the face of a grandfather. Watching him fills me with overwhelming happiness. Beside me, my husband smiles warmly and leans in close. "Thank you for blessing me with such wonderful children. Let's continue to be happy together." "Yes, thank you so much." Moving forward, I am committed to nurturing a loving and warm family. Together with my beloved family, I look forward to building a new happiness.